Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining here on Unapologetic Progressive. Once again, I am back with another video, and this time we're going to talk about something Ted Cruz had to say about the Jimmy Kimmel firing. I thought it was rather interesting considering, how adamant he is of a Trump supporter and how supportive he is of a lot of Trump's policies. I'm also surprised, that I even agree with this man on anything, because if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you know for a fact that I do not like this man. And you know exactly why I don't like this man. I think he's a snake in the grass. I think he's a snake oil salesman. And I think he's a piece of garbage. I think he's an absolute coward. I think he's been terrible for the people of Texas. And in fact, when Texas was dealing with a massive power outage, statewide power outage just about, he got on a plane and left the state instead of trying to help the people. And I just think he's a coward. But he's standing up to Trump here in this one a little bit, and I think he's got a valid point here. So let's listen to this, and then we'll discuss it.
He threatens explicitly, we're going to cancel ABC's license. We're going to take him off the air, so ABC cannot broadcast anymore. And I got to say, he threatens it. He says, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Yeah,
and I got to say that's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, "Nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it." And I got to say, look, I understand. Jimmy Kimmel has mocked me so many times I cannot count. The corporate media, they are dishonest. They are liars. I hate what Jimmy Kimmel said. I am thrilled that he was fired. But let me tell you, if the government gets in the business of saying, we don't like what you, the media, have said, we're going to ban you from the airwaves if you don't say what we like, that will end up bad for conservatives. It reminds me of, you and I are both fans of The Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien. It reminds me of like the Ring of Power. And it is so attractive. It's sort of like conservatives saying, wait, if we have government, we have power. Yep. We can ban the media. Let me tell you what will happen. Going down this road, there will come a time when a Democrat wins again. Wins the White House.
They will get rid of every Democrat talk show in America that's a conservative. They'll get rid of every podcast. They'll get rid of everybody on YouTube.
They will silence us. They will use this power, and they will use it ruthlessly. Yep. And that is dangerous. And by the way, in the Biden administration, they tried to go after and revoke Fox's license because they didn't like, and they say everything they say on Fox is hate speech. I'm sure they say everything you and I say is hate speech, is misinformation. Sure. They've defined anything counter to the leftist narrative as misinformation. Now, we just talked about Jimmy Kimmel was lying. But you know what? It's interesting. Brendan said, well, gosh, they slandered Charlie Kirk and his family. You know what? If they slandered him, there's already a remedy. There's a remedy of defamation. ABC could be sued. And by the way, you get a defamation lawsuit, you could pay millions of dollars. Let that process play out. I think it is unbelievably dangerous for government to put itself in the position of saying, we're going to decide what speech we like and what we don't, and we're going to threaten to take you off air if we don't like what you're saying. And it might feel good right now to threaten Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
But when it is used to silence every conservative in America, we will regret it. And so, again, I like Brendan Carr. But we should not be in this business. We should denounce it. It's fine to say what Jimmy Kimmel said was deplorable. It was disgraceful, and he should be off air. But we shouldn't be threatening government power to force him off air. That's a real mistake.
That's Ted Cruz. Now, I don't agree with everything he said there, but he makes a valid point about it's a dangerous path to be going down. Because once you start trying to use your power to ban media, you're going to end up losing it on your side, too. And I don't think a lot of Republicans are seeing that, especially not Trump and the Trump administration. Now, he's talking about Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC, who threatened ABC with having their broadcast license revoked by the federal government, which would definitely be government overreach, for sure. There's no question about that. But it's also a dangerous situation because, like he said, if you're a conservative watching this, think about it. Would you want a Democrat to come in, take office, and find a way to revoke all your podcasters you watch? To revoke the license of any, business that does business with, say, Ben Shapiro or Ted Cruz? Right? You remember how upset a lot of you got when Alex Jones was deplatformed from this particular platform here. And think about that in a broad sense. Because I'm not saying a Democrat would, but there are people out there. There are bad actors in every group of people. And there could be a president in the future who's like, oh, well, they got rid of ABC and NBC and all these other places because they didn't like what they were saying on air. And then boom, they're like, oh, no more Fox News, no more OAN, no more Newsmax, no more anything that has any kind of conservative bent to it at all. But I don't really believe a Democrat would do that, honestly. Also, during the Biden administration, there was talk of Fox News losing their license. I didn't support that myself. I thought that was a bad idea. There was talk about it, but it wasn't because of what Fox News was saying about Joe Biden, right? It was because they had just lost a massive lawsuit showing them not to be a news organization, where in court documents they referred to themselves as entertainment, not as news. So two totally different reasons for why this is being suggested, right? ABC, or Jimmy Kimmel in particular, has not been kind to Donald Trump and Republicans. But that's the point of America, isn't it? Where the government's not allowed to interfere in your free speech. Sure, ABC had the right to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel if they wanted to. They had the right to do that. They did. No matter, it doesn't even matter what he said. They can fire him. If there's anything in their contract that he breaks, then they can fire him. If they're going to lose out on billions of dollars, they can fire him. Now, I don't think what Jimmy Kimmel said was all that bad. I don't think it was that far off. Because the worst thing I saw Jimmy Kimmel say since last Wednesday, at all, in all the videos and everything I've watched, Jimmy Kimmel, basically, like I said in the last video, Jimmy Kimmel basically said, that the right had spent the last, so many days after the Kirk shooting to try to pin it on the left, even when we had no information. Now, it turned out that the guy did turn out to be, at least have some left-leaning political ideologies, right? But we don't know everything about it. We still don't know. Right? So I don't think what he said was all that wrong, because on social media, all I saw from conservatives was it's the left. The left did it. The moment it happened, the moment that the Charlie Kirk's death was announced, Trump and his people were already blaming the left before we even had any data on this situation, any information. We didn't even know who the person was. We didn't even have a picture yet of who this person was. They were still doing surveillance videos, trying to find the guy, right? So from jump, that's what they were doing. They were blaming the left immediately. So how was Jimmy Kimmel wrong? Mr. Cruz, you're wrong on that part. I think everyone that says that he was wrong is just not paying attention. Because that's exactly what happened. From Wednesday evening through Sunday night, all I heard was, it was a lefty, it was a lefty, it was a lefty. That's all I heard. That's all I saw typed on Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky even. I mean, it was everywhere before we even knew what the guy, believed. I still don't believe the guy was really a leftist. I don't believe he was that far left. I just don't. Because of some of the other connections that have been made. But also because he comes from an extremely conservative area with an extremely conservative family. And I really believe that he went down a rabbit hole that he shouldn't have gone down. The rabbit hole of radicalization. Because there's a difference between a leftist and somebody that's been radicalized to violence. That's not the same thing. Those aren't the same people. I've seen a lot of the stuff out there. I've seen a lot of stuff that's on this platform that could convince people to do something like that. Because it's part of what I cover here. Unfortunately, most of the ones we end up finding are people, in the incel community, things like that. They're not usually on the left doing this kind of thing. Unfortunately, regardless of what what his political ideology was, and whether or not, I want to agree that he was, say as far left as I am, he still left. He was still on the left. He still leaned that way. And he still committed an act of violence. But here's the difference. People on the left, when we realized who this guy was, that this guy did have liberal leanings, we weren't like, oh no, he can't be. Right? I don't think he was as far left as some people are making him out to be. But clearly he did have some liberal leanings, and we have to admit that. But you know what the left did? We condemned that attack. Just like the trans community at Annunciation Catholic School. With that shooting, we immediately condemned that. The community as a whole was appalled. Just like the supposed roommate of the Kirk shooter. But that's all we heard for days from the right. That's all we heard from Trump and everybody. So what did Jimmy Kimmel actually say that was so bad? Because I don't think it was that bad. At least not bad enough to be fired, and definitely not bad enough for ABC to be threatened to have their license revoked. You would have think that they showed the shooting live on air, or that they were showing something explicit to get threats like that. But I think Ted Cruz is right here. I believe it's a dangerous path to take. I believe this could be really bad for not just America, but like he said, conservatives in general. This is not North Korea. This is not, some, communist or fascist dictatorship. At least it's not supposed to be. Everybody's supposed to be able to have a free exchange of ideas. Period. I don't care if I like what you have to say or not. Will I call you out on what you have to say when I think it's entirely wrong? Yeah. But I will adamantly stand beside you and demand that you have the right to say what the hell you want to say. Because I don't care what you have to say, but you should have the right to say it. You may be one of those people that absolutely hates my community. And you may stand out there on your street corner hollering, God hates us. But you know what? I'll stand right here and tell you that you're allowed to say that you are allowed to have your speech. As long as you're not inciting violence, I don't care. That's how it's supposed to function in this country. Everybody gets to speak, no matter how offensive or disgusting that speech may be. A few years ago, I guess it was about 2 years ago, I went to a medieval fair here in Norman, Oklahoma. And interestingly enough, there was a man there who was seriously anti-abortion and was literally professing his views and handing out little pamphlets about abortion and how wrong it was. Did I go and complain? Did anybody in the area complain? As liberal as as most of the people that visit that fair can be. Anyway, nobody called the police about it. Nobody had him arrested. And there was no acts of violence against the man. They let him speak, and we let him speak. And he debated a few people as they came by that disagreed. They didn't shut him down. He didn't shut them down. They had a debate. They had a discussion. That's how it's supposed to work in America. We can have a debate. We can have a discussion about different political issues. But that's exactly what it's supposed to be, a debate. You're not supposed to shut off other people's views. At least not in the America I was raised in. I grew up in the 90s. The 90s was a very interesting time. It was a time where you could literally say anything and nobody would really cry about it. Now, I'm not saying words aren't hurtful. I'm not saying words don't scar people. But to have a free society, everybody has to have the right to speak. Like I have said repeatedly since last Wednesday, the only way to fight bad ideas is with better ideas. And that's how America moves forward. That is how we solve the issue. I believe our issue of political violence is let people speak and don't react violently. Right? What happened to Kirk was terrible. What happened to Jimmy Kimmel was terrible. And I can't support either of them. And I'm glad to see at least one Republican, has an intestinal fortitude to be like, hey, this ain't right. I'm just surprised it's that Republican. Because Ted Cruz never fights back against the Trump administration. But this is one of the biggest condemnations I have heard from the Republican Party about some of the fascist tactics that the Trump administration is trying to employ. The thing is, the issue with it all, it doesn't stop at TV, does it? With everything Trump is doing, getting rid of, anybody that disagrees with him and all this stuff, a Democrat could win the presidency in 2028. And then he could replace all those people that Trump replaced with loyalists with Democratic loyalists that will do their bidding. So this doesn't just stop at TV. This isn't just a dangerous path for television and free speech. This is a path to solidified, centralized power in a fascist dictatorship. That is that is the threat. Like I've said before, I didn't care for Jimmy Kimmel. He's not my guy. I don't like his brand of comedy. I just don't. I'm definitely more more of a Carlin, style comedy fan. I'm not, I just don't like his type of comedy. So I don't care for it. You want to know the last time I watched Jimmy Kimmel? Probably 20 years ago. When he first came out. When I was listening to different, late night shows, trying to find one that I liked. And I only liked David Letterman. Especially after, Jay Leno went off the air when he got replaced. And then I really enjoyed Stephen Colbert. Just because I found him funny. Very rarely do I find a comedian that's not in the style of, of George Carlin to be funny. And I generally like drier content, comedians as well. But I like some of the older comics. And Jimmy Kimmel just doesn't do that for me. So I'm not sitting here defending him as in he's I'm some kind of fan of his, because I don't care for him. But he has the right to say what he wants. The other day, Kilmeade over there on Fox News said one of the most vile and disgusting things I've ever heard come out of a newscaster's mouth. A journalist's mouth, when he said that homeless people should be sent to lethal injection, to the death chamber, that they should be euthanized for simply being homeless and not wanting the help that they are given, or choosing to live on the street instead of being in a homeless shelter. And we can talk about the reasonings why, different veterans and other homeless people wouldn't want to stay in one of those places. There's a reason for it. There's a reason why some people don't go to those places. And that'll be another video that we will discuss. Now, that all said, next Friday, if I have time, it'll be somewhere between probably 2 and 4 next week. I plan to go live here on YouTube. We will see how that goes. That is the plan. I'll let you know later next week. But next Friday between 2 and 4, I may very well be going live here. I wanted to give you a heads up because a lot of people don't see when I go live because I don't notify people. I will make a few updates next week and text posts here on YouTube, so be on the lookout for those. But yeah, that's what I have for you today. I hope you've had a good week. I hope you're doing okay. I know times have been a little rough lately. And next week we will talk about the potential of a government shutdown. I don't know exactly when that will happen. I have not been able to keep up with it as much as I would like because I've been focused on other things like, free speech and the tragedy that happened last week. Anyhow, I'll see you down the road.